Hey kids, time once again for another edition of Ron Helverson Presents the Nebraskans in History. Nebraskans in History today we feature the great actor Mr. Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor was born in Philly, Nebraska, and here I'm dialing up the information as we speak. Here it is. He was born August 5th, 1911 in Philly, Nebraska. Now that's just south of Lincoln, the capital, of course. And he was the only child of Ruth Adeline and Spangler Andrew Brough. Now, he was a farmer who had turned into a doctor in later life. During his early life, the family moved several times, living in such places as Muskogee, Oklahoma, Kirkville, Missouri, and, of course, in Fremont, Nebraska. But by September of 1917, the Broughs had found themselves moving back to the area where they originally were from, which is Beatrice, Nebraska, where they remained for the next 16 years. Now, I didn't know that they lived there for 16 more years before he would ever go out into the world. Now, as a teenager, Robert Taylor was a track and field star and played cello at the high school orchestra. Upon graduation, he enrolled in Doane College in Crete, Nebraska. That's not too far from Lincoln as well. While at Doane, he took cello lessons from Professor Herbert E. Gray, whom he admired and idolized. Professor Gray announced that he was accepting a new position at Pomona College, that should be, in Claremont, California. When he announced that, Bob Taylor decided to move to California and enroll at Pomona. He joined the campus theater and eventually was spotted by an MGM talent scout. That would have been by 1932, after a production of Journey's End. Now, a little bit of story in between there, before 1932. They don't talk about his radio career. He had a radio career, radio stations here in Nebraska, as a matter of fact. He was an announcer at radio station KMMJ in Grand Island, Nebraska, when it was in back in the days when they were in a tiny little studio in downtown Grand Island, which has turned into many different things since then. But he was an announcer there around 1925, 1926, around the time that KMMJ started. And the only reason that I know any of that is because I worked at KMMJ back in the 1980s, I should say. And when I was there, in the halls, all over the walls, there were pictures of Robert Taylor coming back to Grand Island to view the place, and going to Funner Park, and going to the track, and all that good stuff. But he would come back periodically, and this would be in his later years, in the 60s. He would come back and visit Grand Island and the old haunts of KMMJ. But he was an announcer at KMMJ in Grand Island around 1925-26. Of course, now we can go back to where we were, which is when he got into movies in 1932. And from there on, it was basically the rest was history at that point. He would go on to appear into films for Golden Metro Mayor, which is MGM. His first leading role was in a movie, I should say, called Magnificent Obsession. And his popularity increased after that in the late 30s and early 40s. In 1936, he did Camille, very famous there. He did the comedy A Yank at Oxford in 1938, Waterloo Bridge in 1940, and Bataan in 1943. Now, during World War II, he served the United States Naval Air Forces, where he worked as a flight instructor and appeared in instructional films. And then from 1959 to 1962, he would go on into television. In his later years, he would go on to play in the show The Detective, starring Robert Taylor. Now, if you remember that, you would remember the song, Watching the Detectives. It kind of ties together. In 1966, he assumed hosting duties after his friend Ronald Reagan would go on to become governor of California that year. Bob Taylor would step in to become the host of Death Valley Days, and would do that right up until his death in 1969. Now, he passed away June 8, 1969, from cancer, lung cancer that is, at the age of 57. Robert Taylor, Nebraskan in History.